and I had to get up on my desk because it was pretty high up. And I remember putting it on the hanger, and then I had it around my neck. What I remember next is this is really, really weird. What's going on? Like, this feels very physical. Like, this is not a dream. I cannot wake up. I start hearing voices coming from where I was going towards, like very angry voices, mocking voices, hateful voices. You don't know what fear is until you're in a place that you're unfamiliar with. I could feel a presence around me. I started feeling a presence around me. And then, I started feeling scratches. I started getting scratched all over my body, like deep burning scratches. Now I'm terrified beyond anything that I can put into words right now. Absolute terror. And it said, "You're mine now. You're mine. You're mine now."
Hi, welcome to Touching the Afterlife. Our guest today is Paul. Paul reached out to me about a year ago and wanted to share a story, but it took a year of him building up courage and praying to get his story out. And he's here today to share for the first time his experience. When he was 12 years old, he was mad at his mom, and his mom and sister walked in his room and found him hanging from a cord. What happens next, he's going to share. He went to hell and was tortured there by demons. You don't want to miss his story today. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I guess you kind of kicked it off right. I have my story to tell today. I'd like to disclaim a little bit that I did write it out as kind of voice to text type thing because this did happen 28 years ago. I'm 40 now, and this took place when I was 12. So I thought it was best for me to kind of get it out on paper, to be able to look at it and then read it along with you and your audience, and bring some color to it. So I'll go ahead and begin. So this is my witness and testimony of the power in the name of Jesus Christ. I guess I'll start with a little bit of background about myself, and kind of my relationship with Jesus. So my dad was a Catholic priest, before obviously he had met my sister and I, and my mom was kind of born in the 60s, California girl, who traveled east, and met my father. And so needless to say, I was exposed to Christianity, and the teachings of the Bible and all that at an early age. But I was never really into church. In fact, I dreaded going to church on Sundays. Like most kids, it's a very boring and dry, especially in a Catholic church, where it's pretty much always the same, very ritualistic. So when I was in church, I would draw or do whatever I could to pass the times. Oddly enough, and something that's followed me my whole life, I had took an interest in the Book of Revelation. It was such a radical book compared to every other chapter in the Bible, and it was very interesting to me as a kid, to read some crazy things going on in a book that I thought was kind of dull and boring. And as a kid, I was very a risk taker, very impulsive, doing whatever I could to get into trouble. So things that weren't adrenaline oriented, like going to church, were boring to me. And I mean, as a kid, and for a lot of my life, saying you have this relationship with Jesus or being openly Christian was not a cool thing, at least in my circle of friends. I liked things that were pretty far away from the church, and actually from a pretty young age, which kind of brings me into a major focus of my story, which is related to the age of accountability. I realize now that I lost my innocence pretty early. Um, I've liked, action movies, more violent things, and also sexual things, which, I I had friends in my childhood whose parents would let us watch, pretty much anything, R-rated stuff. In particular, I think about one friend that, I mean, for a few years, probably when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, stuff like that. We stay over there. We'd stay up late watching late night TV, like stuff like, I don't know, like Bikini Car Wash or something. That was, looking back, actually pretty soft core, and extremely inappropriate for a child. Much less an 8 or 9 year old. So of course, my my parents had no idea I was doing this, and of course, I wasn't telling her because I enjoyed it and wanted to continue watching, the Rambos or whatever. So I guess you could say, I was pretty interested in sex or the other sex at a pretty young age. There's actually something that really haunts me. I still remember it. And it's extremely embarrassing to talk about. But I just watched something at my friend's house. I think it was Weird Science or something like that. And I still remember, like, I got back to my house, I was in my room, and just oddly enough, I was looking over to a corner that I'll tell you about of my room in a second. That I said, man, I would sell my soul to the devil if I could have a woman, just appear in my room like that. Um, and I tell you these things, even though they're embarrassing, because I think it's somewhat core to my testimony, and provides some insight into the age of accountability or innocence in the eyes of God. Um, so I guess at any rate, I'll kind of get to my story, or more of the reason I'm talking to you. And I want to preface this by saying that, as you mentioned, it took me a long time to be able to talk about this with you. But for most of my life, I've been really ashamed about this story. It's kind of been a stain on me and something that's been extremely embarrassing. So for me to get up here and do this and talk to you is really beyond anything I ever thought I'd do. And I try not to get emotional, but I remember a lot of the details and the feelings too, and it can get very intense for me. So I just want to preface my story with that. So I guess now that I've given you a little bit of background, um, I'll get to kind of what prompted me to testify today. I was telling Julie, my relationship with Jesus has been kind of on and off for most of my life. It's been pretty lukewarm. And what I mean by that is, because of the experience I shared, I've never wavered in my belief of Jesus. But probably from, I don't know, I mean, middle school, high school, up until pretty recently, like 2022, 2023, I'd consider myself um, pretty distant from the church and the teachings of Jesus. You know, uh, like most, I went through a very difficult time during COVID. Prior to it, I was doing very well career-wise, earning more than I ever had in doing things that I love. Then COVID hit, and I went through some pivotal experiences like a divorce, losing a business, and a couple other things that really prompted me to re-examine what mattered to me most in life, and to refocus my priorities around that. However, my focus wasn't initially or immediately on Jesus. It was more on myself. And I can tell you that his absence was very noticeable. And I'll leave it at that. Story for another day. But um, what really kind of prompted me to really re-examine my relationship with Jesus was um, it was really weird. It was really, really weird. But it was like the night or two before the October 7th attack on Israel. Um, it was, I'm a pretty vivid dreamer. I remember a lot of my dreams. Um, but it was, the night or two before. I couldn't tell you exactly if it was the night before or not, but that night I woke up from a dream and screamed, "Save them, Jesus!" Just, and I remember it because I was crying when I had woken up, and just, I mean, you know, I can't even explain it. I mean, it doesn't usually happen. Certainly not me waking up and actually saying something outside of my dream. But all I could remember was kind of being in some very violent conflict, and being on the safe side, but seeing people in front of me just kind of, in trouble. Something bad was about to happen to them. And I was being pulled away, and I screamed out, just, Jesus, save them, Jesus. And, I kind of was like, okay, that's weird. I'm going to put that in the back of my mind. Um, then when the attack happened, I was like, wow, it really kind of shook me, and it made me feel like maybe that's a sign I need to, start reconnecting. And it was kind of around that time, Julie, that I reached out to you, because as I was kind of re-examining my faith, I started praying a lot more, asking for guidance, asking for direction, um, and and really trying to let go of things I'd been attached to, and really just say, Jesus, fill my heart, guide me, direct me, you know, do with me what you need. And I don't know what made me think back to the story I'm going to tell you, but I started getting interested in near death experiences, and it reminded me um, of something that I saw in high school. Um, it was a History Channel documentary. Actually, I know the name. It's called Hell, the Devil's Domain. And from what happened to me until then, everything was just my recollection, right? It was my kind of um, understanding and interpretation of what had happened, what I saw, what I experienced, what I felt. But I saw this documentary, and it begins with the story of a man who I believe suffered a heart attack, and he had a near-death experience. And his account of hell was very, very similar to what I experienced, in my near-death experience. And in fact, it had a drawing at the end, kind of showing what he experienced, and that was identical to what I experienced, and that really stuck with me, and it made me realize, wait a second, maybe, because I've had people, and I haven't shared it that much, but when I have shared it, a lot of people, especially very secular people, are like, oh yeah, it was a dream, that stuff happens, I'm glad you're okay. But it's like, well, this wasn't a dream though to me, and that was kind of the only thing I could say. And now I see this documentary where an older gentleman experienced exactly what I did. I mean, the picture, and I could send it to you, maybe you could put it up on the screen at some point, but it was identical. And so that really told me, hey, this is, trust your gut, this is a real thing, this is real. And so anyway, I found that documentary, I rewatched it again, and it really it really moved me again, and it brought me to tears. And so I started feeling this push to kind of tell my story. And that's when I reached out to you, Julie. But at that point, I call myself an infant with the Lord, still holding on to a lot of worldly things, not fully giving my trust. And so when I reached out to Julie the first time, I was like, hey, I have a story I want to tell, but can I do it anonymously? And I think her response was like, well, testimonies are a leap of faith and not done anonymously. And so at that point in my life, my faith was not strong enough for me to get out in front of the public and share what has been to me one of my deepest, darkest secrets, something that I've been ashamed of. And so, it's taking, a lot of prayer, a lot of growing, a lot of changing. And I want to say something about changing. When you really give your life to Jesus, it's not instant, it's not immediate, but they really they really come from within. There's so many things that I did or like that now I look at and I can barely think of them. They disgust me, and that's not something I ever would have thought would have happened. It was completely organic. Just a little tidbit there on my relationship with Jesus and how my faith has grown. But since reaching out to Julie, a lot of growing, a lot of changing. Went through some health things that made me confront my own mortality, and really one of the biggest things is that I've seen this world change at a speed and in ways I could have never imagined. I think that we as a collective species have never been further from God. And as I mentioned earlier, the book of Revelation was kind of my go-to when I attended church. And my interest in Christian eschatology never really faded. So I can't help but think that we are in the end times. And I also think that's why God has pushed me to have faith in him, his plans for me, and to tell you the story I'm about to tell you. So, yeah, I've prayed hard about this, and that this is an accurate reflection of what happened, because it was a long time ago. I've spoken with my mom and my sister about it, so they can fill in some details for me. So I guess I'll go ahead and get started. Um, so I guess I was it's kind of hard for me to capture or frame what state of mind I was in. It was so long ago. So I'll give you just kind of how the day was going. So I was a pretty good student, a decent student in school, and going back to what I was talking about earlier, when I was a kid, I was very rambunctious, very impulsive, very, very impulsive. It's like a moth to a flame type thing. And so I and my mom and I were close when I was young, and she was there for the most part. My dad worked a lot, so really my main relationship was with my mom. But that kind of we had a really close relationship, but we started butting heads when she tried to homeschool me in fourth grade. And I think that really damaged our relationship and kind of our dynamic. And we have very similar type A personalities. And so we're just meant to butt heads when there's an argument. So anyway, it was 1997. I was 12 years old in the seventh grade. I had just taken an English test, or maybe gotten my grade back, and it was like a B or B plus, and I was excited. And I went home, and it was a nasty rainy day outside, and I guess I told my mom, and her reaction was like, oh, B plus, not an A, or at least that's how I took it. I guess that's how I felt. But that really upset me. I don't know what it was. It was arguments before that, days before. It was probably a tense week. But it really upset me. I don't know why. Like I said, probably prior arguments building up to it. But I remember I went outside after we had gotten into an argument about that. I wanted to skate. I used to do that stuff, but it was raining, so couldn't really do that. And I was mad. Um, and I think my mom and I probably got into it again. I basically I was grounded or went to my room and was just really, really, really upset. I must have felt like nothing I did was good or good enough. So I just went to my room. I remember I was really upset, really angry, and crying. And I probably just wanted to do something, to get even with her or demonstrate, how unhappy I was or how upset I was. And I guess, at that point, the impulsivity in me completely took over, or, maybe it was Satan, in that room with me, guiding me. It's weird. I go back to earlier when I was talking about when I was, you know, wishing I'd sell my soul and looking over the corner of the room. That corner of the room is where I found a hook from the ceiling that held planters or whatever. So I basically I had this. It was like a soccer training device, but basically was a noose. Um, and so I took um, that soccer device, noose, whatever, put it around my neck, put it on that plant holder hanger in the corner of my room, um, and I had to get up on my desk because it was pretty high up, and so um, I remember putting it on the hanger, and then I had it around my neck. But what I remember next is that I took it off, um, and set it down and walked to my bed, and I went to sleep. Um, but I hadn't. I'd actually, I guess, slipped off my desk, um, and was caught. And I think the thing people don't know, at least I don't think they know, and I'm kind of hesitant to even say this, but I'll go ahead and say it, is that when you get something restricted right here, and when you cut off the blood flow, you are out like that. It's pretty instant. And so I guess I'm gonna have to kind of juxtaposition between what was going on in real life and what I was experiencing. And so I'm going to go back. I'll take it a step back on what I thought had happened. So I thought I had taken it off and gone and laid down on my bed and fallen asleep. Um, Here's the thing, though, is that and my memory of this is crystal clear. I can picture it, because um, and I should have known that's not what I did, because when I took the noose off, um, my room had this like sparkling, glistening quality to it. It was this radiant um, light, and I remember walking towards my bed and seeing that it was a beautiful day outside, like absolutely gorgeous. I remember looking out and seeing a lot of activity, like cars, playing, like people playing. I just remember this just beautiful, radiant, like glistening light. I guess it's the best way to describe it. I mean, um, almost like there was a rainbow on stuff of just colorful, like colors I can't describe. Um, just beautiful, like breathtaking and peaceful, very, very peaceful. And so, as I mentioned, that day was a really nasty day. It was dark, stormy, raining, thundering, lightning, all that stuff. Um, so, that should have been my first clue to myself that it wasn't a dream. Um, so, I definitely should have known that it wasn't a dream. So I go and lay down very peacefully. I still remember the glow of the room, and I go to sleep. And so in my dream, I find myself on this um, cart. I guess you could. To me, it was like a mining cart. That's what it felt like, at least. Compact, open type, cube that was clearly on some sort of track and made the same type of noises you'd expect, like going through a mine. And it was very dark, I mean, pretty much pitch black. And the only thing that I could really see was kind of the wood in front of me, and I'm kind of holding on to it, riding down these tracks in complete darkness. And I start kind of seeing things off to my left that, I mean, I guess they were memories or just visions of different times in my life. But it wasn't like the same as just a memory, in your head. It was almost like uh, it was physical. It was like chunks or snapshots of the physical world in 3D. Like I could see these. I mean, these things in front of me, these visions or whatever you want to call it. And if when I'm passing them, I could kind of zoom in and kind of see more of what was going on. Um, so I'm seeing these things, and that are familiar to me, in one way or another. Whether I couldn't tell you the exact details, but probably just different times. And so I'm just riding on this cart, being like, okay, this is weird. And then I see to my left something that was not familiar to me. It was kind of this developing scene that I could not identify. And when I went to zoom in, kind of to like get a better look of what was going on, I was like, boom, instantly transported to this vision, or this, this chunk of reality that I was unfamiliar with. And and so um, I zoom in, I'm there, and kind of when my vision settled and I could understand where I was at, I saw a group of girls walking towards me. One of them came front and center. She was pretty, and I'm telling you why I'm describing her appearance in a little bit, kind of basic, um, clothed in some sort of uniform or garb, but she was pure. Like there was this aura or essence of her that I could tell was just like pure, I guess is the best way to put it. It was, and at this point in my mind, I'm thinking, what, who is this? Why am I looking at this girl, this woman? She it wasn't anything like you'd expect a dream to be, where in my mind, what I had been indoctrinated with was that that 80s B grade, blonde, blue eyed, woman, this seductive presence. And this girl was none of that. Um, she was none of that. And so in my mind, I was like, what is this? Like, why is this girl here? And as soon as I said that, boom, um, I'm right back on that mining cart. And I'm like, okay, this is weird, because it started, when you're in a dream and sometimes things get so real, you end up waking up, right? Because it's your mind probably saying, oh, this is a dream, or your subconscious pulling you out. But I was stuck there. I'm like, okay, this is weird. And I'm starting to become very kind of aware, or more aware, I should say, that this really wasn't feeling like a dream. And so, you know, back on, I'll just call it the cart, and, you know, going down further down this track into the darkness, and I start seeing something to my right. And um, it's kind of strange to explain, because it reminded me something actually out of the movie Beetlejuice, which I watched a ton when I was little. Always thought it was super fascinating. Again, kind of that violent, weird, very far from God stuff, that I was into. And so I see that, and I want to zoom in, and so boom, I'm transported there, and I'm walking up to this, um, you know, building, and it's exactly like in Beetlejuice, where I don't know if your viewers will remember, but it's like you zoom in, or it's like it's a camera that zooms into the little town, and there you see Beetlejuice, and he's with scantily clad women, right? It's like girls, 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 and it was the same thing. It was very, very close, to that, and so I am there, and I start kind of getting closer, and it's a big party. Probably, stuff I wanted to do that I saw on TV. And obviously, I was way too young to do, but just what I had been inundated with. Um, and there's people drinking, people laughing, there's music, and I didn't know about drugs at that point, but definitely a lot of drinking. The things that I had seen. And then, um, three women appeared in front of me. You know, but the difference was they were fully naked. And at that point, I hadn't really seen that before, not like that. I still remember it. Actually, I take that back. I think it was that year or the year before was the first time I had seen actual pornography. It was a magazine that had been snuck in school and passed under the stalls, and we had taken, like, a group of my friends had taken turns with it. So I really, again, I mean, and that was when I was, I think, in sixth grade. So a 12, 11, 12-year old, extremely young, extremely young. Um, and so I'm going to go back to my story. So these women appear before me, very seductive, like kind of just, like ushering me towards them and leading me in. And it kind of opened up a path. It kind of, like, parted ways to go inside, leading me forward. And one of them in the middle came, towards me with a big cup. It was like a chalice. And I looked in, and I knew it was filled with alcohol. I think it was wine or something. I don't remember. But I saw it. I grabbed the cup and I drank it. And then boom, um, I was out of there immediately and back on the cart. Um, and so at this point, I was like, okay, this is really, really weird. What's going on? Like, this feels very physical. Like, this is not a dream. I cannot wake up. And at this point, the tracks are getting louder, and I start hearing voices coming from where I was going towards. like very angry voices, mocking voices, hateful voices. I mean, they were taunting me, like, oh, you did it now. You're going to get what you wanted. You're going to get what you deserve. Now you're going to pay, type thing. And then my cart just drops completely. It's straight up free fall. It's like being shot out of a cannon, except down, straight down. And at first, it was just like one of those dreams where you're falling. Your stomach's doing backflips, butterflies, all that stuff. And then you wake up with a jolt. But I didn't wake up. I kept falling and falling and falling down. And then I stopped. There was no impact. I didn't hit the ground, like splat or whatever. I was just there. I was still conscious, but I wasn't in my room. I wasn't awake. I didn't know where I was. And I couldn't see anything. It was pitch black around me. And the first thing that I tried to do was scream. I wanted to shout, scream, like, where am I? What is going on? But I couldn't. It was like I didn't have a voice. Like I felt like I was screaming, but no sound was coming out. It was like trying to scream inside of a soundproof box. Like, you feel the effort, the strain, but nothing's coming out. Nobody's hearing you. You can't, because you can't make a sound. But I felt everything. I could feel that effort. I could feel my pull. I could smell stuff. It smelled kind of like an ashtray, like just burnt, like soot from a fireplace, coal. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. So I'm in this pitch black place. I can't wake up. I can't scream. I can't use my voice. I don't know where I'm at. I thought, of course, going back to the beginning, that I had gone to sleep. And so I'm extremely scared, more than I ever have been in my life at that point, right? Like, you don't know what fear is until you're in a place that you're unfamiliar with. You can feel things, but you can't say a word. You can't move. That's where I was, and so I'm thinking, okay, I'm in a void, and I'm just here alone. I can't wake up. What's going on? But I soon realized I wasn't alone. At first I kind of was just there, and I could feel a presence around me. I started feeling a presence around me. And at first it was just kind of like as if someone had walked past you and you kind of felt that light breeze. I could feel that because I could feel everything. And so I kind of feel something push past me. And that, obviously, now I'm terrified beyond anything that I can put into words right now. Absolute terror, because I'm sitting there. I can't see, but I can smell, but I can feel, but I can't move. I can feel the effort, but I still can't move. And so I'm sitting there, and then I feel another thing going past my other shoulder. And I'm like, okay, what is going on? What is going on? And I start in extreme fear, terror. I start feeling these crawling sensations on me, kind of like insect like. And then I started feeling actual, like, I started getting touched. Like, first it was kind of like kind of just like a little, kind of like a push, and I can't do anything. Then there was a kind of like a shove, like I'm getting pushed around, and I'm trying to like regain where I'm at, but I'm stuck. Um, and these crawling sensations I'm feeling as I'm getting pushed started turning into pokes, like sharp pokes. And those pokes started turning into scratches. I just started getting scratched all over my body, like deep burning scratches. And then I really started getting, like, I guess the best way I can describe it is just scraped, you know, just scraped. And I'm literally just sitting there. I can't do anything. I can't move, can't talk, I can't scream. Want to scream, can't fight, can't move away. Um, and then I started seeing something way far in my like in the distance in front of me. It was really far away, um, almost like a fire, but I wouldn't describe it as. I would just describe it as more of like a red, really dark orange light. Um, and while this is happening, I start hearing a voice, and I couldn't make out what it was saying at first, but it kept getting closer, and as it got closer, it started getting brighter. And I could see more of where I was. It seemed to be like a cave, enormous, vast, just pitch black cave. And while all this is happening, the scratching really turned more violent into like tearing pieces of me. That felt like something was just like scraping me from the inside out into my stomach, just ripping me apart. And then I heard the voice very clearly, like in the most supernaturally awful voice you could have ever like dreamed up, like very similar to Hollywoodized, styled, voice of Satan, that extremely deep, dark voice. And I heard it clearly, and it said, "You're mine now. You're mine. You're mine now." And I knew that voice. I knew exactly who it was. It was him. It was Satan. And he was laughing this deep, horrible, like just completely inhuman laugh. And I'm getting torn apart, ripped apart. I could feel all of it. And I was screaming, but nothing came out. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't run. I had no power there. I was completely trapped. And I was lost. And I hear this voice getting so close to me, literally to the point where it was about to consume me. And somehow, some way, I dropped to my knees somehow, put my hands together, and I said, "Jesus, please save me." Sorry. Yeah, this was the most powerful part of what I experienced, because when I said that, when I said, "Jesus, please save me," there was a blast of the most pure white light that just rained down on me. And just this relief that I've never felt. And when I said, "Jesus, please save me," that light, all I could see was light, and it lifted me up. I'll show you what happened. It lifted me up to where this is my body, right? It lifted me up to where I was just like this, like I had been pulled up by, like a Star Trek tractor beam or something like that, just like straight up. And this goes back to that video I mentioned, the clip from Hell, the Devil's Domain on the History Channel with that older gentleman. The picture he drew was the exact same thing I experienced. Identical. Identical. And so, anyway, I'm immediately removed from there. It just instantly removed from there, and I'm back on some sort of, it seemed like a cart, but it wasn't. It was I, an improved cart, I guess, not a dark cart. Um, and I was back on, and I as soon as I was on that, it was not black anymore. It was just this brilliant, pure white light. And I remember I was only on it for a couple of seconds, and I saw doors, like these big white doors, um, kind of just open in front of me. And as it was opening, um, kind of this just like smoke, or just something kind of was rolling out, kind of like, and I kind of like the sound of like air brakes on a tractor trailer. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but it's kind of like this just general release of pressure, like the train was slowing. And I pulled into this. I guess this was my final station. Um, and it was, I felt peace, um, from being stuck, trapped, to being shot out of a bullet the right way up. Um, I felt this just peace, this total peace, more than I've ever felt in my life. Like this ultimate peace, and this understanding that I was going to be okay. I was going to be okay. Everything was going to be okay. Um, and so then I woke up. But when I woke up, I wasn't in my bedroom. I was in a hospital room looking down at myself and the chaos around me. I was lying down, and when I focused on me, I guess this is kind of the out of body. I went into my body, and I'm laying on a table, and I sit straight up, like just straight, straight up like that. And I could see everything around me, but my eyes were taped shut. And that's kind of when I heard people reacting. A nurse, like one nurse, like screamed, another nurse jumped back, and I was told, like, almost fainted. Um, and I found out later why. Um, and I guess this is kind of how I'm going to transition back to kind of what was really happening throughout the time that I just told you. So they the hospital staff freaked out. Why? Because they thought I was going to be a vegetable. So um, after I went into my room and locked the door, which I did, I locked my door. Um, my mom and my sisters went downstairs. I think my mom was doing laundry. My sister was either watching a movie or doing homework. She was 2 years older than me. Um, Nobody knows how much time passed, but there were physical clues on me. Both my mom and my sister said they got this overwhelming feeling, almost simultaneously, that they needed to check on me. Like it wasn't normal. It wasn't like, oh, I wonder what Paul is doing. It was this strong pull, like God was telling them, go check on Paul now. So um, they both looked at each other and met, like, something's wrong with Paul. What's Paul doing? And they run upstairs. And because I had locked the door, they had to, get a paper clip, and kind of, it's the one where you can stick it in the place, and it'll unlock it. And so when they got there, they opened the door. They saw me. I was hanging by my neck. I had slipped off the desk. My knees were on or barely on the floor, touching, because the noose was holding me up. My mom was able to lift me up while my sister had to get on top of my desk to cut me down. Um, the ambulance got there really fast. There's an EMT who lived 3 doors up the street. He was off duty, but he heard the call on his radio and immediately ran down to help. Um, when they brought me out on a stretcher, racing to the ambulance, they had a white sheet over my face. I remember it's the first thing that my friends told me, because a lot of my friends were outside playing, or not playing, but they had come out to see the ambulance. And that's the first thing they told me, that they thought I died. I had a white sheet over my face. And so, in fact, the EMT up the street stopped by my house a couple of days later and told my mom that he didn't think I was going to survive getting to the hospital. And he said it was a miracle that I was even alive. And I found out later that they did have to resuscitate me and flatlined. And this is kind of what shocked everyone, and why the doctors gave the prognosis they did. Every single blood vessel in my face had burst, like every single one. My entire face was black and purple from the busted vessels, capillaries, all that stuff. I mean, if you saw me from a distance, my skin looked completely discolored because of how long I'd been deprived of oxygen. My eyes were blood red because every vessel had burst. And I had a very deep ring indention around my neck that scabbed up and was there for weeks and weeks. When my dad arrived to the hospital, and the doctors told him, your son should be dead. They said that my brain had been deprived of oxygen for too long. I should have died, 100% should have died. And that I was kind of in like a coma-like state. And they said that even if I did wake up, that I would 100% be a vegetable. I wouldn't be able to walk, talk, no function left. I'd basically have to be, intubated, or, have assisted living for the rest of my life. So that's why people in the ER, really freaked out, because they thought completely that, this kid's going to be a vegetable. We're going to put him on life support, whatever. Because they thought I'd never walk or talk or, do anything. But, I've somehow became a lawyer, and I guess that's my story.
What a miracle. You are a miracle.
It's crazy. I'm just glad I'm able to finally share it. So
I'm so thankful that you shared it with us today. The mining cart. That's where you first discovered yourself, on this mining cart going around in hell. Isn't mining like your what they do in caves?
and that's where I thought I was. It was just in some cave in my dream, and dreaming, had no clue. But yeah, it was definitely a cave. And when I started seeing Satan coming towards me, it was very clear this is just this vast cavern. I didn't see other people. I've seen accounts where they have other people or they hear other noises, but I mean, to be honest, I was just what I was going through is all I could focus on. And then that voice directed solely at me, telling me that I was his, and I've heard the same accounts from other people, that same language.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, the hell is likened to a cave or cavern and pits. And then the other thing is, you hear people, the false thought of hell's a big party. And it was almost like when you were describing the different sections or the different parts that you were zoomed in on, you were there, the things that you described, it sounds like a big party, but that was almost like the illusion to bring you there. But then at the end of your experience is what was really going to go on.
right, yeah. I mean, that it was, it goes kind of into the age of accountability, I think, on that note. Really thinking about it, because I've kind of interpreted this as God was testing my soul, my subconscious, um, something you can't lie about. It's what you want. It's what internally where your soul is at. And he gave me that one unfamiliar situation to put myself into to test me and see kind of what would you choose, right? You can't, like, there's no lying to God, right? He knows your heart. So he's testing I think to me, it was him testing my heart, and I rejected it. I rejected the pureness that was in front of me, the that situation. Um, Looking back, everything around me, it was almost like a hospital-like setting. That it was just very sterile, very clean, very pure. Um, I could tell that the individual I interacted with was the same, and that was not of interest to me. I wanted, the dark, the party, the whatever. And so, boom, that was kind of like, boom, all right, that was your shot. Now let's test you. If you don't want that, where's your heart? And when I was tempted with that, my heart was not in the right place, and it said, yeah, give me that, right? And so I think that, and I'm not saying, and I don't mean to say or want people to think, hey, this is going to be what happens. You're going to be subject to really judgment to where you don't have a choice, which I think will happen. But in my situation, in this near death experience, where I was able to come back, I think it was just it was telling me, like, you, or at least now I'm realizing how much of an impact what you consume has on you, just your heart. Like, things that you can't lie to yourself about, because you can't lie to God about anything, right? And so I think it's very important for parents. I have a 6-year-old daughter, to guard their hearts completely, fully. I mean, this world is full of just, I mean, it's getting to a place I could have never imagined. I really couldn't have. And I'm finding things just that are supposed to be for kids that I'll sit on and see my daughter watching. I'm like, why are they talking about witchcraft? Why is there all this other stuff in here that was never in stuff when I was a kid? So I think one reason I feel, you know, glad to be able to share this is from that perspective, that, yeah, I think, um, it's not age, it's what have you been exposed to, right? And where's your heart at? And I think if you get exposed to things at an early age, it can really, eh, in the eyes of God, I don't know. But what I'd say is that it goes back to just, yeah, guarding your heart, guarding your kid's heart, protecting them, um, from very sinful things, from things that God does not like.
I think you're absolutely right. You had to come on because we are in the end days and the dark is getting darker, and people this needs to be exposed of what's really going on in the afterlife. And thank God Jesus came to rescue you and show you the light, and that there is hope and that you don't have to go there. Amen.
Amen.
So one other thing, you talked about there was a corner of your room where you had that first demonic thought that you were going to sell your soul to
Right.
Satan.
And
You
that's the
tell me-
same corner where I ended up hanging myself. So, and it's kind of crazy to think about. It really is, because I still remember where I was thinking that. I was looking over to that corner. Um,
Yeah, almost like a portal, or there was some type of thing that they were involved in there.
Something. I mean, it's just it's a strange coincidence, and I really don't believe in coincidences. So,
Yeah.
um,
So it's interesting too. You were 12 years old, and then how, the devil tries to get us off the path of God, right? I mean,
oh
you
yeah,
just said up until a couple years ago,
yeah.
he's bringing you full circle. And I think that's what he's doing with a lot of people in these days as well.
That's exactly how I feel. Like, and again, I'm still a baby in my Christian journey, in my journey with Jesus. But I know that, at least I'm pretty sure that the Bible talks about a lot of people coming to Jesus during the end times, and I feel like that's why he's called me and pulled me to do this, even though it's, like I said, one of the most embarrassing things to me. I just feel like it needs to get out because I do feel like we're walking that end line. All these things going on in the world. We've always had wars and rumors of wars, but not like this, and not with some of the other prophetic things that needed to happen in the past when you had, world wars going on. So I'm grateful that I've gotten to come on here and share this with you, Julie, and your viewers and audience. And I hope it is helpful to some people, provide some insight. So.
And I'm grateful for you and for you coming on and sharing your story that needed to be told.